shiapa tuche tempe trinle yar ngoda pelge drolor zampe ze parache pande lame shabla solvade Om Guru Vajra Dara Suma Timonisha Sane Kar Uta Vardanya Shri Bhat Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Om Guru Vajra Dara Suma Timonisha Sane Kar Uta Vardanya Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Om Guru Vajra Timonisha Sane Karm Uta Vardanya Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Om Guru Vajradar Soma Timonisha Sane Karm Uta Vardanya Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Om Guru Vajradara Soma Timonisha Sane Karm Uta Vardanya Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Om Guru Vajradara Suma Timonisha Sane Kar Uta Vardanya Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Dhagi Jitsun Lama Tuje Che Nyamda Dala Tuje Sikso So Gebe Shesan Dala Tendo So Oyon Sunge Nawa Tsedo So Tseje Ningne Solwa Debe Tse Dechen Korlo Visu Lekshone Yila Sambe Dede Malupa Geme Lhunge Drupra Chingelo Soni Sodan Dikdun Shabe Tse Dunge Namke Yin So Lekshone Lapchen tsoni yonso zopa dan cheranye dun chanra jingelo chancho parge ninsen tugun tu niyu peme siudru lekshun chancho drube gegen kunshishi tungen de la drupra jingelo dagelo na chola chokpa dan chemi samchor ngemba shiwa dan chodan tumbe dudun malupa geme lunge drupra jingelo Dorna tingne tserva thamche dan teche pardo nekab thamche to rese kyamne lama kele me tuche chenge dala sikso gongyab drewe nyamda dajala jetsun lame tuche rab gongne kodan sunge nawa drame tu nyamsu nyongwe kesan toprasho kewa kuntu yanda lama dan drame cheki pela lonche chi sadan lamgi yunde Dorje change kopa nyur tobe sho Pakyuke kodan dagi alu Pakyuke sungdan dagi nga Pakyuke tukdan dagi yi Ten yerme chiktu chingi alu Makyuke kodan dagi alu Makyuke sungdan dagi nga Makyuke tukdan dagi yi ten yerme chikto chingi alo Om Muni Muni Mahamuni Shakyamuni Swaha Om Muni Muni Mahamuni Shakyamuni Swaha Om Muni Mahamuni Shakyamuni Swaha shibeki chushimeto Ramare rabalingashi Nide gempadi Sange shintu Mikte ulwarki Drokuna namanda shingla Chöpar shoye damanguru ratna mandrala kam niryata yami Sangye chodan tsoge chonam la chancho pardo dani kyapso che dagi jinso gibes Rola pinchira sangye drubra sho sangye chodan tsoge chonam chancho pardo dani kyapso che dagi jinso gibes sonam Drola pinchira sangye drubra sho sangye chodan tsoge chonam la chancho pardodani kyapso che dagi jinso gibe sonam ki drola pinchira sangye drupara sho.
In the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, I take refuge until enlightenment. With the practice of generosity and the other perfections, may I obtain Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. Good evening. Among all the resources that we have available in our lives, in both, let's say, in our worldly world, I mean, our family, our work, our health, material aspects, etc., and also in the spiritual, on the spiritual side, our inner development. One of the most powerful, resource that we have is our imagination. It's a very powerful tool, and somehow it seems, every once in a while, it seems that imagination is like, how can I say? We say someone is there just imagining, he's not getting to the point. Instead, it made me think. A few days ago, I read an article. It was talking about some scientific developments that are happening, and it was saying that you can't create anything that wasn't first imagined. Before inventing something, that thing needs to be imagined. It's not for nothing that many of the things that were invented, even technological things, the first, the first to develop them were like science fiction, writers and directors like Kubrick in Odyssey, the Space Odyssey. Their conversations through video calls, which at the time it seemed like a dream. I mean, many other things too. At a certain point, someone allowed himself to imagine, and once I imagined something, that the imagination allows me to desire it, to want it. Because when I imagine that thing, I'm able to see it as possible and say, oh, how wonderful it would be. The once I have that desire of, of how wonderful it would be to see someone, you know, you know, how wonderful it would be to see someone, while I'm talking to them through a screen. Now, instead, we say how wonderful it would be to talk to someone, without a screen in between. And you start with, oh, how do we get there? And there's the whole process of how to transform that imagination, that idea, into something concrete that we can experience directly. But this imagining, it's an extremely powerful tool, and it's one of the most important characteristics that we have, this capacity that we have to imagine our creativity. I remember also talking about this, let's call worldly side. One reference point for our a reference point for the great, successful people. It was Steve Jobs, and he talked a lot about his own creativity and his ability to imagine things. And he talked about how important that was for him. In 1985 or something like that, he imagined, and he said he imagined and he wanted a computer that would fit in the palm of his hand. Which, I mean, and he went on with that, and he was able to, develop the iPhone. But he had that idea in 1985 when he imagined it. He dreamt about it. You do one step after the next. You go little by little in that direction. And when we imagine something, and normally, even when we talk about imagining, something positive, something idealized, because when we imagine something and we put energy into that, until it materializes, and this happens on so many levels, even on not positive things like our fears. We project all our various fears. It's almost like we're calling that to happen. And this reminds me a little bit of the placebo effect. It seems like today, the doctors don't use placebos anymore, but until not very long ago, there were placebos because because hypochondriacs is not just today, that hypochondriac that would go to a doctor, and then when the doctor would give him a pill with it was just sugar, so if the doctor gives you just sugar and where there's no side effects to it except making the person feel better, then bring it on. It was seen as a treatment. It wasn't seen as fake. So really, when we believe in something, if we believe that something is good for us and we're sure about it, our body reacts accordingly. Let's remember that together with the placebo effect, there's also the nocebo effect. I'm sure that this is not going to be good for me, and then my body is going to react. And now, exactly how it all happens, this whole process, the hormonal processes, these chemical processes, how the body reacts, I have no idea. But what I know from my own personal experience and what has been taught to me is that when we believe that something is good for us, this has a physical effect on our body. And the same thing, if we think something is bad for us. So we come also from this idea that this body and mind are separate. I remember once, together with Lama Gangchen, we were in Holland, and our friend Rohir, he was under Lama Gangchen's guide. He organized conferences in Holland for complementary psychiatry, integrative psychiatry, where they were big conferences, um, of maybe 1,500 participants, and they were doctors and psychiatrists, and they were mostly psychologists and psychiatrists and doctors every 2 years. And the last one, there was you know, there was the president of um, all the Psychiatrists Association of Holland. I mean, really important people. And once, in this conference, let's say that in this case, the two that really didn't have much to do with this, um, with these professionals was me and Lama Gangchen. Once I remember Lama Gangchen wasn't there, and I needed to speak, and there were four people who were speaking. There was the president of the Psychiatric Association, someone else, and there was me. I had to talk about the importance of spirituality in mental health. But so one day I was there in this conference with Lama Gangchen, and there was this moment before the formal part of the conference, and we were drinking tea and talking. And Lama Gangchen, he didn't, his strong point, wasn't his forte, wasn't just to talk for talking, or small talk, I'm creating conversation. So I remember this, he sat down and there was this doctor next to him. I don't remember who it was. He was one of the speakers of the conference. At a certain point, Rinpoche said, "Oh, so you're a doctor?" "Yes." "What do you do?" "I'm a psychiatrist." And Rinpoche, just to break the ice, he said, "Well, tell me the story of your medicine." And he started talking about the story of psychiatry. And at a certain point, he said, and about 150 years ago, sincerely, I don't remember if that's the right date he said. My memory it can fail me here. But so let's say to up to 150 years ago or whatever it was believed that the mind and the body were two separate things. And then it was discovered by, and I don't remember who, instead that the mind and the body are connected. And I remember that Lama Gangchen just started laughing. And I felt a little bit uncomfortable. He was laughing. "What do you mean? 150 years ago, you understood that the mind and the body are connected." And I mean, Buddha talked about this 2,500 years ago. And the example that is given in Buddhist texts, that the body and the mind are the two manifestations of the same thing. They're strictly connected. I mean, you just see when you're sad, tears come out of your eye. It's really easy to see that if there was no correlation between them. And here, there's a very important point that often is not understood. Well, it's my interpretation anyway. It's not that the mind and the body are connected. Body and mind are inseparable. They are two manifestations of the same thing. They're like two doors that go to the same room. The one who enters in that door gets into this room, and the one gets the other door, walks into this door, gets in the same door. So, so what happens is in the Buddhist Vajrayana view, we have three levels of body and mind. There's a gross level, a coarse level that makes reference to our physical body that can be seen through our bare eyes, you know, just flesh and bones, our blood and organs, etc. This is our coarse, gross body that is inseparable from our coarse mind. All those mental states that are manifested are it's that it's a vis is a it's the the consciousness of our senses and our mind and all the emotions as they are manifested. For example, in the subtle mind, it would be the aspects of our mind that are not manifested, but that exist. For example, if I said to you, in this moment, I'm not angry. I'm not angry. In fact, I'm not angry. And you know, and I don't see anyone angry here. Doesn't seem to me like this. But the fact that we're not angry now doesn't mean that we are without anger. So it says, you know, bring me an object of anger. You know, we'll see if I have anger or not. You know, like the monk who was doing a retreat, and a master went to see him, and I have the names of the, you know, in the story, but I can't remember them. And so he went to see him. He said, "Oh, my dear monk, what are you doing your retreat on?" And he says, "I'm meditating and I'm practicing patience. I'm perfecting patience." He said, "Oh, wonderful! That's wonderful." And then he spits on him and slaps him in the face, and then this monk, you know, wants to react, and you know, and the other monk, he took a step backwards. He said, "Remember, without an object of anger, you cannot practice patience." You know, it's easy to say, "Oh, I'm so patient," when everything's fine. To practice patience, one needs an object to work on. In this moment, I'm not angry, but bring me an object of anger, and we'll see if I have anger or not. And on this point, also, um, more prepared practitioners, they do, and in the past they did and they do. If we say, if at a certain point one trains to practice patience and then realize that no situation makes him upset. So I don't get angry with anything that happens around me. Does that mean that I don't have anger? I need to go look for it then. So what these practitioners would go look for more extreme situations, look for objects of anger that were even more extreme, to see if somewhere there was something hidden there. All of this to say that the anger that I have, but in this moment is not manifest. Where is it? It's in the subtle mind. In the subtle mind, there's love and anger, there's jealousy, satisfaction. There are all of our conditionings and memories and habits that are, let's say, I don't want to say that the subtle mind is the subconscious, because the subconscious is a specific term in Western psychology, and maybe they don't completely correspond. But the subtle mind goes completely together with the subtle body. The subtle body is the part of our body, our physical material, but cannot be seen with our bare eyes. For example, our blood pressure. You can't see that with your eyes, but it's part of our body. Or the the impulses in our nervous system, for example, we can't see them. But if they weren't there, we wouldn't be able to lift our arm. You know, that's what they tell us anyway. So there are parts, like energetic parts, they're called, or just channels, winds and drops that are directly connected with our subtle mind. I'm simplifying, but then there's a very subtle body, which is an energetic body that continues from life to life, that goes together with the very subtle mind, which is non-conceptual. It's not, goes beyond our emotions, but where our emotions and habits are, where the footprint are of these emotions and these habits. They go together. If there's a gross body, there's a gross mind. If there's a subtle mind, there's a subtle body. And at death, the very subtle body and mind leave this body, and that's what we call death, according to the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, the one I learned. All of this to say that if mind and body are so connected, this is the one manifestation of the same, everything that happens, what happens to the mind has an influence over the body, and what happens to the body has an influence over the mind. They're not two separate things. So, what is a simple way, if our mental states of being, our emotions are positive, or if they're harmful, you know, one of the easiest way to see this is to look at the reaction of our body when these emotions come out. When one feels envy, for example, or aversion because someone has something that I would like to have. How is the body? Is the body relaxed? Or is there tension? There's tension, fear, jealousy, anger, dissatisfaction, attachment. Physically, what does that bring? Does it bring relaxation? No, it brings tension. And what's interesting that I've observed in myself and in other people is that even when an emotion is present, but it's not really taken into consideration, on a conceptual level. In other words, there's fear, but it's not conceptualized. One is not thinking about it too much. That's better, but you can feel it in the body. In the body, you can see it. I've known some people, and they seem like magicians. There's this, they can touch the body and say, well, here you felt this emotion, and from the body they can say, no, 5 years ago you had a really strong moment of fear. I don't know what it was, but I can feel it in your body. Two people in my come to my mind. Both of them do these techniques to free the body from that emotion. To say that everything that happens to us has an enormous influence on our physical state. And then those tensions that we have, gradually, they accumulate. If I feel anger, for example, and that generates tension, once that anger is no longer manifest, but that energy keeps generating attention, keeps working, and it gets, it deposits itself on one organ or another and creates an imbalance in our physical body. So our mental attitude is not just about imagining, thinking pink, positive thinking, a kind of, some kind of state that's disconnected from reality. There's nothing more real that if I have a certain feeling, nothing more real than a certain feeling that's going to influence my body. And I need to be careful. And someone could say, oh, but you're drinking that. Um, you know, say, okay, you're drinking that. It's not good for you, but you think it's good for you, so it must be good for you. Is it good or bad? I mean, where is reality? In the object or in my experience? If it's good for me, even if the same thing for you is not good, for me it's good. And if it's bad, if it's harmful for me, then it is. We need to consider our experience. We need to respect it, beyond what someone else can say. I was thinking about Cinzia now, who has this particular characteristic. So that coffee makes her fall asleep. Normally when someone drinks coffee, what happens? One wakes up. Uh, and there's some who have some kind of wire that's installed upside down. So you should follow your own experience at that point. You know, you know. There's some, to wake up. They drink chamomile, and to fall asleep, drink coffee. One needs to follow one's own experience, not just because it's said like this. If I see that thinking in this way, thinking positively about something, believing that something is good for me, that it's good and it's beneficial for me, it's real. If I think that thinking that something is bad for me and it actually is harmful for me, then that too is real. But what happens is we live in a context, how can I say, where our worldview, our paradigm is strongly shaped by a mechanical, materialistic view, where reality is what is outside of us. And we perceive and we live, what's outside of us. And you think that there's a relationship between what I'm thinking and what's outside of me. That's crazy. It's not because I think that this is good for me that it's going to change the active principles of it, or the thinking that it's bad for me is going to actually change. Um, you know, um, Change. It's not going to. It's going to change the way I perceive it. It's going to change the way I live it, and that makes an enormous difference. Reality is not just about objects, but also the observer, like communication, verbal communication. It's not just about the one who's speaking, but it's also about the one listening. It's made up of the one listening too. In Brazil, it said something like, the sin is not in the speaker, but in the listener. If one says something, how did you hear that? How did you hear that thing? Okay, that's a whole different topic. But the point is, when we talk, it's two. We need two. I I speak and I'm emitting sounds, and you receive those, and you and you um, uh, and you decipher them and understand it. Sometimes I ask, have you understood? I'm not sure what you have understood. Once Lama Gangchen, he was talking in his village, and he would talk to people. I saw him a couple times do this, and then he would ask, did you understand? And they would answer, los. Los in Tibetan is a term that means both yes and no. It's a term that means okay. It's a very respectful term to say, I've received what you've said, but can be a respectful way of saying yes, but also of saying no. So he would say things, and these people, and they're very simple people also, um, and uh, not to right to say uncomfortable, but being in the presence of Lama Gangchen was something very, very strong for them. So, let's say they weren't in full possession of their senses, So they would say, "Have you understood?" And they would say "los," and they say it actually like you suck your saliva up a little bit, and and then he'll say, "Did you understand los?" And then and he would say, "Well, what did you understand?" And they would say los. And I said, "Well, you know." And then to be sure that they had really understood, he would say one sentence at a time and make them repeat. And it was impressive because it was almost as if that they didn't speak the same language sometimes. All of this to say that when we communicate verbally, even if we think that we're understanding, we don't know what the other one said. We only know what we think we understood. In general, it's like this. But we live in this reality where the reality around us appears to us as if it existed objectively, and our worldview, and I'm talking about the paradigm, it's a paradigm of an objective reality. So to say that our mind has an influence on our health from a, in the sense of like believing that something is good for us or bad for us, it seems like craziness. I don't know if this is clear. I mean, this view exists. Like, what do you mean? This is good for you. But and if I believe instead that it's mad for me, oh, then you're stupid. Because it's good for you, you know. What, l- how much does the mind influence one's experience? I don't know to give a percentage, but I'm, I'm sure that it has a very big influence. All of this to say that we need to use this to our benefit. We need to use it to our favor because the more I speak, and let's remember that our speech has an enormous power to direct our mind. The more I speak with criticisms and complaints, the the more I see the negative side of things or see the glass half empty, the more I'm going to generate emotions and mental states that are connected to a reality where things are not going well. And my body is going to react accordingly. I'm sure that this is good for me. If I'm if I'm sure something's good for me, if I'm sure something's bad for me, it's going to have a different effect on me. Every once in a while, when you see, I saw some interviews where there were these people like very, very um, long lives. I remember someone in Cuba. Um, this was a person who was like 115 years old, very healthy, and they asked him at a certain point, "What's your secret for longevity? What do you eat? What do you do?" And he says, "I smoke a lot of cigars, and I eat salami every day or something like this, and drink grappa. So cigars, salami, and grappa." But they say, "Well, what do you? Isn't that bad for your lungs and this and that?" But I ask myself. On the other hand, here we are to do 1,000 rules on what we can eat and what we can't eat, and because this is bad for you, this is good for you, or this is bad for you, this is bad for you, this is bad for you. When you buy something, it doesn't say. When you buy something, it doesn't say contains. It says it does not contain. It's without this, without that. What logic? Even something that should not have the gluten in it says without gluten. All right, but it's just it's it's more important these days what's without than with. Why? Because we have this culture where, this is, where there's a lot of emphasis on this is bad for you, this is bad for you, this is bad for you. I mean, it's great, it's true. There are problems with grains, and lots of people have, intolerances to certain foods. I don't, I've seen, for myself, that certain products, like dairy products, for example, I really thought I wanted them to be good for me, but they're bad for me. There's a physical intolerance. But let's remember, there's also a nocebo effect. If something's bad for you, something's bad for you, something's bad for you. This is bad for me. This is bad for me. At the end, it's going to be bad for you. So what happens is someone has a long, long life and is convinced that what he's doing is good for him. There's also the influence over the mind, the influence of karma. Many other, you know, genetic things. There's so many other aspects of what can bring to good health. Years ago, I heard someone say that the human body is able to heal itself from any sickness. It needs one thing: a mental a mental state of profound joy and satisfaction. When the mind is full of joy and satisfaction, that activates a physical process, of the immune system, makes it capable of curing itself from any sickness. But when someone's sick, are they full of joy and satisfaction? No, the opposite happens. I've seen, for example, the power of our mind on our own perception of our five senses. One thing brings to another. I was told this a few times. A few months ago, I was supposed to go to Holland. And before leaving for the trip, I did the quick test, and I came out positive. And I did the quick test. I was positive. I thought, oh, and now, okay. The first thing is that I isolate myself. I don't see anyone. I called the the head of the hospital, and he said, no, no, come and let's do the molecular test just to be sure. So I went to do that. We tested everyone. 60 people here at the center had to be tested, and they didn't even know why, but well, I just had everyone tested. Everyone was all negative. And then I waited, and the test came the following day in the afternoon. And you know, I thought, I was a little bit happy to stay, closed up for that amount of time. But I went walking in the woods that day, and then I started seeing that at a certain point, I had a little bit of a sore throat. Maybe it's true. And then my head hurts a little bit. Like today, for example, because there's 2 nights that I haven't slept well, and when I don't sleep enough, I get a little bit of a headache, like in this moment. And as if, I had a little bit, I was feeling hot. I said, oh, maybe I have the fever. I measured my temperature 3 times, and I didn't have it. Oh, maybe it's true. And I saw just a direct experience on, like, according to the context, we judge all the rest. I believe, no, I don't think I have. I don't think I have COVID, but there is that possibility. And so I start seeing the world around me as if I had it. I start reacting accordingly. And can go into a reaction of fear. Lama Gangchen often would say that one of the great problems of cancer is the name. It's a sickness that is is the name is very heavy, and he would say, joking with some people, this is not cancer, this is cancel. You're canceling your past debts. But he's saying that, I mean, but the name that we give it, just imagine, you know, I mean, I mean, even here, just having the possibility of a positive, of um, th- just thinking that the test results would have been positive, that was already activating some fear in me. You imagine with having a diagnosis of cancer. I remember once the son of a friend. He was about 3 years old or something like that. 4 years old, I don't remember. At a certain point, the parents realized that on his chest he had um, a, they had something on his chest, and they decide to. I mean, they really wanted. They had like a little um, he had he had something on his chest, and so they brought him on a Sunday to the hospital, and they did an X-ray, and they said, "We're sorry, but we have to keep your child here. He has metastases in the lungs." And they called me. You know, I took the car and I drove to Bologna and to be near them and to understand this. And there was a mother crying at the hospital, the child in already with an IV there in the oncology department. And the next day, they said, "Now let's do another X-ray." They said to do it again because small children, they're not able they're not able to hold their lungs correctly, and the specialist on a Sunday wasn't there. But on Monday, um, it was Monday afternoon or Tuesday, and so then they redid the test with the specialist, and it was perfect. And those little stains on you know little stains on the X-ray, um, it was just showing that the child was not breathing correctly. And on one, so okay, so there was a mistake, no problem. But what's the problem? The fear that that the fear that was that child had to go through. Um, being taken to the oncology department, and the parents that. And then when they said that when once they told him that the child had nothing, wonderful, but that fear is still there. Takes a long time for that fear physically, to get rid of it. Like when you have strong experiences of stress, the body takes a long time to get rid of those, like the strong, like cortisols, through the body. So our mental states have a not just the direct experience of the emotion, but we should consider the what it does to the body. And I'm not criticizing anyone or anyone or anything. I'm just saying this so that we can reflect on our own lifestyle. Because the more I criticize, the more I complain, the more I cultivate fear, etc. My life then it just turns all around that. The more I see things in a positive light, and the more I can rejoice and see the see the positive aspects of things, the more I'm going to be able to receive and receive that, live that. It makes an enormous difference Just a short time ago, I'm thinking of a friend, a disciple of Lama Gangchen, a disciple of Lama Gangchen who had a cancer, um, and instead with this diagnosis, he felt absolutely lucky and joyous. He and and they couldn't when he went to the hospital. That nobody could understand how he could be reacting so positively, but he had this extremely positive um, um, this positive attitude. So how can we cultivate this positive placebo effect, in life, not just for medicine, but it also with people, with situations, can come with so many things. I think that that is bad for me, and and then I'm going to live that thing through that filter. And it's interesting that happens is when we have a kind of fear, when we have an an emotion, or we project some kind of paranoia onto something, gradually we try to create situations that are going to justify that that fear is real. In psychology, there's a specific term for it, and I I have I remember, like, I call it selective cognition, but that's not the right term. Um, so we have this tendency to judge reality, trying to find a kind of coherence with consistency with what we feel inside. Um, Once I heard a contemporary philosopher, and he gave this example. He said, for example, today, he um, this was just after the elections in America. He said there's some people who think, some people have this conspiracy theory, and they think that Trump and Biden are actually the same person, but they have this technique to being able to change face, like that movie Face Off. And so they change faces, but they're the same person. And he said this is an extreme example of someone who inside has a total distrust of the system, and tries to find an explanation that matches what he feels. So, saying one or the other, it's the same thing, it's the same person. But what we do, so, this example is just a total extreme, but let's look, when we're trying to find a storyline that is consistent with our feelings. it, it was a beautiful conversation between two contemporary philosophers, and one was said that politicians are not trying to be elected by bringing the truth, because most people are not interested in the truth. People want some kind of they want a coherence with their feelings, you know, our emotions. So if I have a version, I'm going to look for a storyline that is going to highlight your good or positive negative qualities, negative ones, because I need to find coherence, consistency with my aversion, you know. You know, just for example, if you know, if someone we love does something wrong, we try to justify. We say, "Oh, it's true, I did this, but he was taken by this or this moment like this." Instead, when someone that we don't like does something wrong, or so when someone we don't like does something positive, we say, "Oh, you need to see what's behind that. It's not. It's probably not like that," because we want this the world around us. We want this storyline to be consistent with our feelings. But if I have these feelings of dissatisfaction and anger, and I'm going to try to create a reality around me that's going to hold up those feelings. And the problem is that when we create a reality that holds up that doesn't just hold up feelings, but nourishes them and increases them. I mean, what do I want to feel? How do I want to be? I need to direct my mind towards what is positive and virtuous. Are there problems? If you ask me if I have problems, yes. Or if there are problems, yes. Situations that I don't like or that I would like to be different, yes. But you tell me, who doesn't have problems? Is there someone here who doesn't have any problems? No one. Maybe someone from home can write in, if they don't have any problems. If I think of, the most special people that I've ever met, like Lama Gangchen Rinpoche, when when you hear about the life of his master, Trisha Rinpoche had many problems. It's part of life. We live, in this interdependence, in this interaction with everyone. One is upset and one is joyous. It's just all part of life, a part of this reality. And but we can define how we're going to live these situations and where we're going to put where we're going to direct our thought, our thinking. We have this attitude that often that um, we think, oh, we know what bad times these are, but being very sincere, when I look towards the past and I read a little bit about history, I don't think that the past was any better or worse than the present. I don't think the future will be better. Lama Gangchen would say how wonderful that humans have gone to the moon, but what did they bring back? A little bit of some rocks. But did it better the quality of life of human beings? Did it bring more peace, more joy? I mean, maybe it didn't, I don't know. But what does this mean? It's not a criticism, it's not criticizing having gone to the moon. It's, it's, but it's a criticism in thinking that technological developments can bring happiness. I mean, we have so many more comforts. I mean, just look at the life that we do today, like on a physical level. Is it more comfortable compared to our grandparents? Of course. Just look. One aspect of life is bathroom, for example. I remember a Kunpen Lama Gangchen in Milan. Next week, if everything goes well, hopefully we'll go back there. It used to be it was a popular apartment, where there's one bathroom outside, and that was normal. And now, you know, um, you know, nobody would be able to stay there even for a week. I've got to get out, not just in my room, but I've got to get out of the house. How am I going to do? You know, you cover yourself and put on some slippers. And if you get cold, then you feel a little cold. The bathroom in Milan's not like that anymore. So we're much more comfortable these days. I mean, like now you want to call someone, you don't even need to do, you don't even need to dial the number. You just see the photo and uh, and it goes. I mean, we're just really following the law of minimum effort, maximum comfort. And in these few years, this like it's it's just enormous what we've done in these last few years compared to the 100 years before. But today, are we happier, or do we have more peace? Are we more peaceful compared to those who came before us 100 years ago? I mean, suffering has just mm, has passed from one thing to another. Before there was more physical stress and pain, and now it's more mental. Now have we have so much energy, we don't know what to do with it. We needed to invent the gym, which is so strange. It's the strangest thing ever. Nothing against going to the gym, but it's strange to have to move. It means that our lifestyle is terrible. I'm just going to close my parentheses here. So I have in Brazil, when I go to the Dharma center near my mom's house, at a certain point I go by two big gyms, and they have um, huge windows, with people on, just running on treadmills. And I think, what have we become? It doesn't mean that people today, suffer more than people in the past, but not even less. So the physical suffering in the past is now about there's more mental suffering. So what happens is what determines our well-being is how the person lives his life. And what I want to say here is that I don't believe that that these days are worse than others than the past. Um, you know, personally, when I think about when I think about the these like virtual worlds coming through, the tools of technology, and um, um, there's a world through our smartphone. It makes me fearful. Um, um, when we think about, these alternative realities, um, you know, a, a tool that can help you imagine and create a reality, a virtual reality. Because I mean, the visualization is a virtual reality, but doesn't use external tools. I mean, it's not good or bad. I mean, it depends on what you are imagining. Um, so, so if I use this virtual reality, um, with in a state of peace and balance and satisfaction, to generate love and generosity and other things, and then I'm going to reconnect with those feelings and apply them to my physical life. Let's say this is one thing. Another thing would be creating some kind of parallel world where I'm going to cultivate my desire, my aversion, my ignorance, my selfishness, etc. And where because if I kill virtually, that I'm not generating negative energy inside, I'm not generating aversion. So it's true that we live in times where we have very powerful tools, and it depends on how we use them. But I don't believe that, oh, because these times are so bad. Uh, no, I think that, sincerely, every historical moment had the pros and cons. But we the, we really need to be careful to not victimize ourselves. To like, oh, I'm not well because of this time that we're living, because the government's like this, or I'm not getting into the judgment of a government, or this is not this political moment. One who governs a country, regardless of the country, this the government, the people that make up the government itself, is the fruit of collective karma of its citizens. What does this mean? It is the result of the choices and the actions of all citizens. This is karma. If we want to have a government of a certain kind, then we need to generate the causes to go in that direction. So if I if you I can't criticize the politician who is trying to benefit himself, for and makes decisions for him, just to benefit himself. And when in my daily life, I'm benefiting myself in very small little actions, and can't criticize. I'm just not going to open this door, otherwise we get into a whole topic, a different topic. But what I mean to say is what happens on the macro level is the result of all the micros put together. So what we need to look at our own behavior without pointing the finger at others. I remember once, it's in a very important Lama named Lati Rinpoche, one of the most important disciples of Kyabshe Rinpoche, and he said, what happened in Tibet is not the I it's the 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 I mean, it wasn't it's not the Cultural Revolution of China to blame. I mean, it's the fruit, it's the result of all of our results, which doesn't mean that your actions are not going to bring its results. Like, for example, if I slap you and I say, oh, well, and it's your karma, you created this. If you hadn't created the causes, then you wouldn't you wouldn't be able to experience the result. Puff. No, so on one side is true, but doesn't justify my action where I'm creating other causes and for which I will live other results. All of this to say that if, because if we say it's karma, that we shouldn't then close our eyes. No, we need to change our way of living. We need to live according to what we want, how we want that macro to be. If I, for example, if I have zero corruption in my way of living, and this influences the people around me, I mean, little by little, it gets to the macro level, and I transmit this to my friends and to my children, etc. So let's not victimize ourselves and point the finger. Let's take onto ourselves our own responsibility and say, okay, what can I do? And live with joy. A few days ago, I realized, it's a few weeks now actually, something like that. I had gotten into a little bit into a dynamic that wasn't so great. I was saying, oh, well, this isn't going well. When is this going to end? When is this moment going to end? And this isn't, and the pandemic, etc. You know, we can give 1,000 different names to this and to that, but many things. And and the craziest thing is that you know, no matter who you see, they're talking about the same thing, and you can repeat that same complaint more than a mantra. You know, if we said mantras like this, that would be great. Instead, no, let's just talk about the same thing again and again. You've read it again and again and again, and then you get back to it again. And at a certain point, I said, stop. I'm choosing to be well. Ah, but there's this problem. This happened. I found myself in a situation that I didn't like at all, where I was actually being threatened for something that was like not personal. I'm not going to get into to to the details. The first day I said I didn't. Okay, I don't like this, and then I said, okay, no, my peace. I'm not giving it away for anything. You want to talk to me in this way? You want to do something against me? That's your problem. I I'm going to try to avoid it, try to relate in the best way possible. I'll try to interact positively, but I'm not going to let go of my well-being, my inner peace. I'm not going to just let it go like that. So, how are you? I'm very well, but it's a very not a very well the way we say like in Brazil. Because in Italy, if you ask someone how you are, you say, "Oh, well, or I could be better, or I'm surviving, I'm defending myself, I'm, I'm, Instead, Brazil, oh, you say ottimo, oh, tudo bem, ottimo, ottimo, and then they talk about the problems. But that first answer is everything's really well. Yeah, okay, how are you? No, really well, but I'm really well. Are there problems? Yes. Are there difficulties? Yes. The world around you, is it perfect the way you'd like it to be? No. But I'm fine because I'm choosing to be well. I'm choosing to put my energy in to what's virtuous and positive, that generates joy, that generates well-being. I'm not I'm not pretending that certain things don't exist. No, but I'm going to put my energy into what is going to bring positive fruit. So our mind has this enormous um, power, and it's our mind that um, you know in our daily life, you need to take we need to take care of it. But our inner attitude, or how we um, how we deal with this outside world is key. So we need to really direct well our mind. And here, in and this is what I wanted to talk about today. This was all an introduction. What I wanted to talk about tonight was prayer. Prayer is a word that in Tibetan, there are two translations in Tibetan. One is Soldep and another Munlam. Literally, Soldep would be more correct. Soldep makes reference to like making a request. I make a request. In different texts, you see Solwadeb. Solwadeb means I request. It's not a perfect translation, but more or less. Instead, prayers, the recitations, um, in Buddhism, there are very, very few. The, the all the others that are called prayers, they're munlam, which has nothing to do with prayer. Because the word prayer, what does it make reference to? It's like a request. I ask for something, or I, may this happen. It's a way of asking for something. Munlam, mun comes from munpa in Tibetan. Most words have two syllables, composed words. They're words with three syllables are almost inexistent. And most two-syllable words can be said in one syllable. So munpa is mun pa lam and lam. Lam means path or a road, a way, and mun aspiration. So munpa is aspiration. So it's the path of aspiration, which means to direct our aspiration. Allow yourself to imagine something beautiful and desire it. I'll give you an example of a munlam, which would be these verses these aspirational verses. How can we translate them? These words to direct our motivation that have to for example, from the text of Bodhisattva Charvatara, the Bodhisattva Charvatara, the guide, the way of the Bodhisattva, written by Shantideva. And in the 10th chapter, there are the dedications, and there are these verses that say, any being, any sick person that exists, may he be cured quickly from his sickness. May all beings be always free from any sickness. I'm not asking something for someone. I'm generating an aspiration. How beautiful would it be if it were like this? I'm generating a desire. May the medicines be may the medicines be may the medicines work, and may beings that create sickness, like microorganisms, may they have compassion for the sick person, and may those beings, it says actually, those beings, these microorganisms that are in space, may they have compassion for those who are sick. It can be translated into many different ways. Sim, it means small beings that can also nourish themselves for blood, and in some cases it's actually translated as vampires. Kandro, kan is space, and dro is to go. So may these small beings that are connected to the blood, that nourish themselves with blood, that travel in space. Yeah, that's called microorganisms. In some texts, it says, may the vampires and the witches have compassion. It has nothing to do with vampires and witches. This is a problem sometimes of translations. And this last part says, in all directions. Many any suffering mind or body, you know, the exists may through the strength of my merits, my positive energy, may they obtain an ocean of well-being and happiness. So we're directing our positive energy so that every being can be happy. These are aspirational words called munlam. But one important aspect of prayer is, in this context, is where we're using words to direct our mind, to imagine. Imagine what? Imagine a better world. Imagine a reality where we can, may the precious mind of the bodhicitta that has not yet arisen, may it arise and not degenerate. May all beings be have happiness and its causes. May all beings be free from suffering and its causes. We're directing our mind. So in these prayers, in this Munlam, there's this component of imagination where we're imagining something. It's something that I desire. I'm going to use my words to direct my mind in there. Prayers are extremely important. One, because it's a way that we have to connect ourselves with something positive and direct our mind to something. So when we take, for example, the practice of self-healing, which is not classified as a prayer, it's a sadhana, but they're words that help us connect with states of consciousness that are positive, with a better self, and it directs us towards this idea of a better self. And there's another part, and I wouldn't know how to explain it well, but our mind, as we said before, has an enormous power towards ourselves, and in some cases we can interact with others. There is this interaction from one to the other. So prayer, when I want something for you, I'm interacting with you. When I'm thinking about you, I'm interacting with you. And here, there's a little bit of a taboo here in our materialistic view, which is, the so-called, we think that we have, I'm not saying that my mind goes to your mind, It's like a program, for example. I mean, within the processor, but it can also, but that can also send signals, radio signals outside. I mean, we have tremendous amount of power. I don't know. For example, has it happened? For example, you think about someone, and then in that moment, someone calls you. I mean, is there anyone here that this hasn't happened to? There was a scientist called Rupert Sheldrake, for example. And first, he was very well known and recognized, and he would write for Science and Nature, and he did experiments for Harvard and Oxford. At a certain point, he started researching. He was using scientific research methods and tools to study topics that some thought were non-scientific, like telepathy, and so he was using scientific methods and tools, and and he, and he did this research. Why is it that you think of someone and then that person calls you? Um, knew him, and he said that my problem is I talk to normal people, ordinary people. They say obviously that my research is obvious, but when I speak to scientists instead, they tell me I'm crazy. Um, if He also did a lot of research on animals. Um, that many animals have the ability to communicate through thought. The animal closest to us is a dog, and he did this very nice experiment together with the BBC, where they took two these two synchronized cameras, and one was at home where there was like a boy or girl, I don't remember, with a dog, and at a certain point, um, he left at a time different, different than the normal time, and then there was another. So there was a camera on him, and then a camera that stayed in the house. Um, um, yeah. So the dog stayed at home and stayed close to the mother, and so the dog left, and so the person the the boy left and didn't know, the dog didn't know where he was going. And then as soon as the boy said, okay, now I'm gonna he thought, now I'm going home, the dog actually got up and went towards the window. And then at a certain point, the boy says, "Okay, no, I'm not going to go home now." And then he changed direction, and after just a few seconds, the dog went back and sat down. And this scientist was saying, a friend of his who was a scientist, and he knew um, that the wife of a scientist friend, she said that she knew if he was going to a bar, according to the behavior of the dog. So if the you know so you know s- so if the dog was waiting by the door, he was on his way home. But if he went um, you know to sleep somewhere else, it was because he wasn't on his way home. But there's so many, if there's if the dog has this ability, and there's so many insects, obviously, that communicate through these kinds of these signals and thoughts. I mean, we're animals too. So, you know, so why can a dog have this power and and a person can't? And so he wrote some beautiful books. He did this research to show that there is this amount, there is this reality of thought to thought. You know, you think about this person because before that person calls you, that person thinks of you. You know, so a person thinking of you, you're receiving that, you're perceiving that, and so and then you get the call. So what I want to say is that our mind has a enormous power, much more than what we're able to put into words. And when we desire something virtuous, something positive towards someone, and we have this feeling of love, or we want someone's we have this love and we want their happiness, or we have compassion and we want that person to be free from suffering, or if someone is sick and we imagine that person healthy, we want that person's peace, and we generate this aspiration for that person, not just for an instant, but for a longer period of time. This has a tremendous um, effect, you know. So beyond the words, you know, the words and the prayers that someone recites for a sick person, what is worth much more is the intention that someone has. The fact that we're directing our mind towards that person in a positive way. And then the words, the terms, the words that are used, the, how do you say, the formulas that are repeated with this intention, you know, if those formulas that are repeated over centuries, you know, have a have a stronger power. And the scientist Rupert Sheldrake had his own theory that had to do with words. Um, but I'm not going to get into those details. So a word, um, if it's used with a certain intention, the more that word is used with a certain feeling, you know, then the stronger it becomes. He talks about morphogenetic field. There was there's an experiment um, um, where mhm, they take an image many, many years ago, before internet. They went into Australia during the day, and it was evening in England. Evening in England during daytime in Australia. And they were asking people, they were showing people this image, and in the street they would say, how many people do you see in this image? And they had just a few seconds to answer. At a certain point, as they're doing that, after a few hours, in England, you know, in a certain region, or a couple thousand people, um, a couple thousand people in this area. Um, and they show this image, but then they show actually the image, and they show where all the faces are hidden just for a few minutes. Okay? And then at that point, the people that are being asked in the street in Australia, they were able to see many, many more faces. So, you know, and this also is linked to this theory of the 101 monkeys. I don't know if you've ever heard of this. I'll just tell you in a few words. In the 1970s or 80s, they were doing some scientific research that was based on on Darwin's theory of evolution. And in Japan, they had found this island, which was, they were islands actually, where there were these monkeys, and so they weren't connected. It was so one island had a particular characteristics, and they were able to see how the monkeys evolved differently from island to island, and they were doing research there. And they took potatoes and they put them in the sea, and they washed up on the beach to give to the monkeys. And at the beginning, who had never seen a potato, they would take the potato full of sand. They tried to eat it. It was dirty, and they would just throw it away, and they wouldn't eat it. One day, one feminine monkey, she even has a name. I can't remember. Anyway, this monkey, she took the potato, she washed it, and she eats it. That's good. At this point, the other monkeys imitate her. So they take the potatoes that had washed up on the shore, they wash it and they start eating them. After a certain number of monkeys started doing that, the other monkeys on the other islands started doing the same thing. So, I mean, what did they do? Did they send an SMS? Did they put it on Facebook saying, you can eat the potatoes that wash up on the shore? No, and from this, there's this theory that after a certain number of beings have a certain perception, that is going to influence the others on a subtle level. I can't even explain how, but that here comes this morphogenetic field that I can't really even explain, but just to say that our mind is very complex. There's so many aspects that we don't understand, that we don't know, but we live in this materialistic paradigm. But we shouldn't negate the power of our mind. And one important aspect is prayer. I invite all of you to pray daily, and I don't mean like make a request. You can also do that. That's good. But when I say prayer, I mean recite verses or mantra, or Our Father. What's connected to your faith, to your heart, what touches you, and generate a positive feeling towards a person, towards society. Al- Allow to live that moment where you are directing the strength and the power of your mind towards something positive. I remember years ago in Bali, this small island in Indonesia, there was a tsunami alert. And they said that in 48 hours, an enormous tsunami was going to hit the island. What would happen to us if we got a tsunami alert? Everyone, okay, everyone, far from the beach and fear, etc. What did they do? The government declared a, he closed all the offices, all the stores. He closed all of the stores for 2 days, and he ordered everyone to refresh their altars and their offerings and to pray according to their own religion. And a friend who was there said that the that the streets were the streets were full of people, divided by faith, just praying. I mean, they were cleaning the temples and the churches and making offerings, and the tsunami arrived like a small wave and um, and didn't do any damage for the prayer or not. We don't know, but you know the this another positive effect. This is that it creates union among people, strength among us, and this is it's. I feel like in this moment of pandemic, it's something truly lacking because I mean, we need to unite to do something together. Also, because I mean, being in faced with something that's not positive and feeling um, 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 impotent, it's not good. Yesterday we dedicated these prayers to NgalSo Rinpoche in Switzerland. This is a great master who's not well. We got news that he wasn't well. So what do? We just stay there crying? No, let's put our energy, um, you know, without, great expectations of changing something. But, you know, so we did 24 hours of prayer. Um, And just before the teaching today, I received a message that he's a little bit better. He's reacting well to the treatment, and he's a little bit better. And I don't have this excellent. I don't, ex- think that it's because we did this prayer that he's better. But surely every thought has power. And if nothing else, just coming together to to do something virtuous and positive in a moment of difficulty, that takes away so many negative side effects. If nothing else, then allowing ourselves to do allowing ourselves to do something positive in a moment where we feel that we have no power, we feel powerless. If we took half, or let's say 80%, it's improbable to say everyone, but say 80% of the words, the syllables, this, you know, the words wasted to speak badly about this moment in the government here and there, and instead we use those words to recite positive verses, how much energy would we have? I mean, once you've understood the story of the vaccination, if you if you if you take that all that energy wasted, um, you know, to all that the energy that was spent and wasted on thinking and talking about it, if that energy was used or is used to recite positive positive verses, towards everyone getting healed and feeling better and etc. Last example, for example, Lama Gangchen Rinpoche was very, very practical. And if something happened, like for example, if there was lunch, I saw this many, many times. Maybe there's an important lunch or it's like an important guest, and someone's bringing a plate, and maybe something breaks or the tray falls, and then Rinpoche would say, "Wonderful," and "Yay, great, auguri." The interferences are gone. He, we need to always need to go towards the positive, and instead if someone goes, "Oh, that's horrible. Oh, now what's going to happen? Oh, this is this is not auspicious." I mean, that fear that's created, I mean, that creates so many negative side effects. So things need to be turned around so that they can generate positive energy. Okay, yeah. Would it be better that a tray of food, doesn't fall on top of somebody? I'd say yes, mhm, but not, um, you know, but not all bad things actually, bring bad things. Um, for example, I just remember Teresa Toricchia. She was quite particular. Our friend from Milan. She was a little kleptomaniac. Um, she never stopped talking when she started. If you didn't take her, if you you know if you didn't take her in the right way, she just would, just talk and talk and talk and talk with you. The same thing. But at one point, there was an oracle that was here, and everyone came to ask for blessings. And I said, give a particular blessing to her because she's a little bit crazy. He looked at her with a lot of affection, and he said, "You take very good care of her because she takes away interferences." Let me just open and close the parentheses. The day she died, 2 hours later, the ceiling of the ceiling of the temple collapsed. Anyway, so anytime there was a problem, they would say it was Teresa. You didn't. She absorbed tensions. And when and now that she's not there anymore, other conflicts would come up because if there's somebody that somehow takes up, absorbs a problem, you know, um, l- like imagine like the story of the family that goes to the rabbi, and then so the the wife goes to the rabbi and says, "I'm not well because my husband like this, my son like that, etc., etc." And after a while, then the husband goes to the rabbi. Okay, I've got this problem, I've got that problem because of work, because of my son, and then and then the son goes and he complains about the parents, and then the rabbi calls the whole family together and he says, "Okay, I have a solution for you. You take a goat and you leave the goat free in the living room and come back after a week. After a week, oh, how is everything? Okay, oh yeah, the goat's doing this and that. Okay, well, what about your husband? Oh yeah, my husband's fine. Okay, do one more week with the goat free in the living room, and then one day, the the then the rabbi says, "Okay, now how are you now?" He said, No, 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 everything's fine, but please just take away the goat. Just take away the goat. Everything's fine. It's just the goat." And then the rabbi says, "Okay, just one more week with the goat. One more week with the goat." And then after one more week, the rabbi says, "And how is it everything at home?" "Okay, no, my wife is perfect. My husband's perfect. My son is perfect." He says, "Okay, then you can take away the goat." Okay. Once I was here at the center and I was doing some administration and there were some, complaints about some certain things. And I said, "This is a very good sign. It means that we don't have bigger, real problems. Because when you complain about small things, it means that you don't have really big problems." So this is so sometimes it's, small, some small problems like a goat in the living room, better to have a goat in your living room than to have fight in the family. Sometimes having, you know, sometimes having, you know, when the family had this common enemy of the goat that created union. And beyond all of this, so my point here to conclude is our mind has a much greater power than what we normally recognize. So we need to use our words and the images we see, the situations that we live, to have a vision that goes towards positive. And prayer, generating words, you know, in a mantra or not from words from a prayer from another tradition, with this intention to generate positive energy towards someone. This has an enormous power. It's time to do our dedications, a form of prayer, where we take this positive energy that we have generated in this time together and we're going to direct it um, to direct it somewhere. So we dedicate so that all of those who are present, directly or indirectly, um, you know, the, that we've shared this moment of Dharma together. May we be able to put it into practice. May we be able to live this live the situations, our situations, no matter what they are, peacefully. Um, and those who have more love and wisdom and compassion, may they stay and help us in this life and our future lives. And may those who are sick, may they be cured, and may they always be, may all beings be free from sicknesses. And wherever there's pain and mental or physical pain, may there instead be joy and happiness.
Kutse rapten chin nam kara tin le chochur ge padan losan tempe drume sasum ge drove munse takto ne gyuro chi kewa kuntu yanda lama dan drame cheki pela longche ching sadan lamge yunten rabzo ne dorje change kopa nyur tobsho nimo dele tsendele Nime kuyan delek shing nyensen takto delek pe kuncho sumke jingi loba kuncho sumke ngodrub tsol kuncho sumke trashisho.
At dawn or at dusk, at night or midday, may the three jewels grant us their blessings. May they help us to obtain all realizations and sprinkle the path of our lives with various signs of auspiciousness. Thank you, everyone. Have a nice evening.